Recording in.
Okay, go ahead, Tanya.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Excuse me, we will call the meeting to order. Stephanie, will you do roll?
Yes. Inspector Zeke,
Here.
Inspector Madison,
Here.
Inspector Stanfield, Inspector Pritz,
Here.
Inspector Roberts,
Here.
Inspector Stanfield.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we do the pledge to the flag and the peace pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America and to the republic for which
Stands
it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty
and
and
justice for all.
and our peace
I
pledge.
am a builder,
I am a peace builder.
peace builder. I pledge
I pledge to praise people, to give up put downs,
I will hold peace at home, at
school,
school,
and in my
in
community.
my community, every day.
Thank you. Okay, we have the declaration of emergency. Due to the state declared COVID-19 emergency and the requirements for social distancing, this board meeting shall be conducted virtually with no persons present at the district offices, noting that it is unfeasible to have anyone present at the district offices for this meeting. Can we have a motion?
I move that the board declares that the COVID-19 emergency is a bona fide emergency and authorize the board meeting to proceed by audio and or video conferencing.
Thank you.
Second.
Stephanie, will you call roll?
Yes. Inspector Zeke,
Aye.
Inspector Madison, Inspector Stanfield,
Aye.
Inspector Pritz,
Aye.
Inspector Roberts,
Aye.
Inspector Madison.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carried. Dr. Rouse?
Good evening. Tonight we have a presentation by Mrs. Tamara Mitchell, our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Financial Services, on our tentative budget for the 21-22 school year. So, Mrs. Mitchell?
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone tonight. So as Dr. Rouse said, we will be discussing the tentative budget tonight. So as I always say, when I discuss the tentative budget, this is very, very tentative, even more so this year because we're doing this so early. There's some things outstanding, funds that we know we have access to, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But this year's budget is even more tentative than it usually is. So again, I'll explain that during the presentation. Next slide, please. So I'll begin with an overview of how the numbers look at this point overall. The budget is balanced, which means that revenues are projected to exceed expenditures. As you can see there with that second bullet point, the estimated activity across all funds is tentatively projected to result in a surplus of about $2.58 million. This excludes activity related to the TRS on behalf of payment. And as a reminder, that TRS on behalf of payment represents the dollar amount that the state of Illinois pays on behalf of the district to fund TRS pension costs. So on the official state budget form, that dollar amount appears as both a revenue and an expenditure. So it ends up being a net zero effect on the budget. So these dollars here in the second and the third bullet point exclude that TRS on behalf of payment. The third bullet point there, estimated activity across just the educational, operations and maintenance, transportation, and the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund is projected to result in a surplus of about $2.94 million. So that's, again, just the ed O&M, transportation, and IMRF funds. Next slide, please. So some key assumptions and facts for this tentative budget that I would like to discuss with you tonight. We'll start with the local revenue, property tax receipts. The district over the years has historically seen a 99% property tax collection rate. So we assume that that will continue for this year as well. Also, interest income. So over the last year, with everything that's happened with the economy, interest rates have fallen. And our interest income as a result has fallen over as well. So the district had some pretty high rate investments that came pretty, and then trying to replace those investments with high rate investments is just not happening because the interest rates are lower. The market is improving a bit at this point. For a while during last fiscal year, it was hard to make any investments at all with our financial advisors because the banks just simply did not want the money. So the investment market was a little bit tricky, but things are getting better. But those interest rates are still quite low, nothing like the interest rates that we saw 3 or 4 years ago when we had interest rates at 2% or so. Right now, interest rates are probably around the 0.15% that the district can get. District fees. So at our June board meeting, district fees were suspended for this year. So there will be a reduction in revenue for that at the local level as well. For state revenue, our evidence-based funding, or EBF, will remain flat. This will be the second year in a row that EBF will be flat. Last year it was flat because of COVID-related issues, and then this year it's remaining flat as well. And what that means is the district will not get any of that tier funding that we were getting for the 2 years prior. So again, 2 years in a row, we got tier funding, and now for 2 years in a row, the EBF funding will be flat. As far as mandated categoricals, it's assumed that we will receive 4 payments on those mandated categoricals. Again, the mandated categoricals are quarterly payments that include reimbursement from the state for various special education grants, as well as regular and special ed transportation. We did get all 4 payments for the previous fiscal year, so that's why we're hopeful that we will get those 4 payments again for this fiscal year as well. And I'll also discuss transportation in a little bit more detail later on in this presentation. For federal revenue, overall, we will see increased funding at the federal level. The ESSER 2 and ESSER 3/ART programs total in just over $45 million that the district has been awarded that will need to be spent over the next 2 fiscal years. The ESSER, I'll tell you what ESSER stands for. So ESSER stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and ARP stands for American Rescue Plan. So when you hear me say ESSER or ARP, that's what I'm referring to. So the ESSER 2 money, about $8 million of the $13.1 million that we were allotted is included in this tentative budget. The remaining will need to be spent in the next fiscal year. For ESSER 3/ARP, none of that money that we've been allotted, the $33 million, none of that is written into this budget yet because we have not done the grant application. So we know that we have access to it, but we haven't done the grant application yet. So none of that money is included here. You will see it in September. By then the application will be done. And so we'll know what will be spent this fiscal year. So you'll see a change to the final budget presented in September that will include those dollars. Those dollars must be spent by FY 2024. Lastly, on this slide, employee salaries and employee benefits expenditures. Salaries are projected to increase at an average rate of 3.5%, and benefits projected to increase at an average rate of 4%. Next slide, please. And this slide here is our estimated results of activity by fund. So we're projecting surpluses in 2 of the funds presented here, and then deficits in the other 2, resulting in a surplus, an overall surplus of about $2.94 million. So the large surplus you see there in the transportation fund, I'll talk about that for a little bit. the bulk of the revenues in the transportation fund come from reimbursement. So that would be the mandated state categoricals. Those reimbursements are a year behind. So money that we got last fiscal year in FY21, that money was from the prior year. So in from expenditures that we incurred the prior year. Money that we'll receive in FY22 is going to be from expenditures that we made in FY21. As you know, we did not run many buses during last school year. So those reimbursements are going to be low compared to a normal year where we're running a normal amount of buses. That's where the deficit in this fund comes from. Our revenues are lower than usual. Our expenditures are going to be back up to a normal level. And so we're seeing that deficit in that fund. Even though there's a deficit in that fund, the fund will still end the year in a healthy position. And there was a surplus that resulted this past year in FY21, again, because of the reimbursement. So we received reimbursement on expenditures from the prior year, yet our expenditures in FY21 weren't anywhere close to the money that we were getting. So it'll actually look more like a wash if you compare the 2 years, surplus from FY21 compared to what the projected deficit would be for FY22. It'll all end up balancing out, and then we'll be back on track for the next fiscal year because we'll have more normal operations this year going forward, and that will result in a more normal reimbursement cycle when that transportation claim is filed. Also, the deficit that is projected there in the IMRF fund, that is a planned deficit due to the restrictions of the fund. So once the money goes into that fund, it has to be spent on IMRF expenditures. This has been a budgeting strategy now for the past several years. And again, the fund will still end with a healthy balance. It's just that we're spending those fund reserves down a bit so we can put money in other funds, in our ed fund and operations and maintenance fund, mostly the education fund though. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is a visual representation of our revenues by source. This looks slightly different than it has in the past because of the additional federal revenues. So usually our federal revenues are about 9% of the budget, whereas this year, the federal revenues are projected to be about 20%. And again, that's because of the additional monies that we're getting from the ESSER II program. And then that percentage will likely change a bit more in September once we have the ESSER III dollars budgeted in there as well. So as of right now, our state funding is our most plentiful source of funding at about 59%, followed by local, which is at about 21%. Our local funding, the majority of that comes from property taxes, and then federal, so our Title I and Title II grants, our National School Lunch Program, and now the ESSER II program, the ESSER II grant, that is really the bulk of the federal dollars that we're seeing in this tentative budget. Next slide, please. And this is a visual representation of our expenditures by object. So our salaries and benefits comprise about 66% of the total budget, with purchase services making up the next largest share at 17%. As a reminder, our purchase services include expenditures for transportation services, payments for certain student services activities, so like our speech paths that we contract out, psychologists that are contracted out, those types of services. Next, we have supplies, which includes our curriculum materials, custodial and ground supplies, as well as utilities. That total makes up 9% of the budget, and other includes special education tuition, debt service, capital outlay, dues and fees, and et cetera. That rounds out the budget with the other section at 8%. Next slide, please. And so now the timeline for our budget cycle. So tentative budget is what was presented tonight. And as we move through the budget cycle, those numbers are constantly reviewed, constantly being tweaked as we get more information. So as I get more information from the state about our evidence-based funding and get a solid dollar amount for that, that will be included as we complete the ESSER III grant application. those expenditures and the projected revenues from that will be included as well. So it's a fluid process until we get to our meeting in September. So publication will go out tomorrow that our tentative budget is available for public review and public inspection. Public hearing will be on September 8th, and then that budget will be submitted to ISB and to the Regional Office of Education. That should say prior to the September 30th deadline. So prior to the September 30th deadline. And that is all that I have. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Tamara. I do have a question. How much money are we not collecting in fees? I know we agreed at the last meeting not to collect fees, but about how much money is that?
It's about, because the vast majority of our students would qualify for fee waivers. About 70% of our students would qualify for fee waivers. So what we're not collecting is between $65,000, $70,000.
Okay.
So it's not a huge impact to the budget.
I have a question.
Yes.
The emergency fund, if there is no emergency in that fiscal year, are we allowed to keep that money and use it for something else?
What do you mean by emergency fund?
There was, earlier you spoke about an emergency fund. I should have said something right then. I can't remember the amount. I can't.
Are you talking about the ESSER?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about the ESSER?
Yes. It was in that same area, I thought.
It was the American Recovery Plan.
I
Or
thought
the
there was-
ESSER, the ESSER is the Elementary Secondary Emergency Fund. That fund, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
From the federal government?
Yes.
Okay, Tamara's talking about the ESSER funds.
Okay, so that is a federal grant program. So it's not, we will spend that money. Those are, for ESSER 2, the district was allotted about $13.1 million. For ESSER 3, the district was allotted about $33 million. The 13.1, the grant has already been written. We've already started doing purchase orders for materials for that, and already started doing RFPs and bids for other things. So that money will be spent, and it is a reimbursement grant as well. For the ESSER 3, that's the grant that we have not written for yet, but that application will be done, submitted as well. We won't spend all 33 million in 1 year. Just like with the ESSER 2, we won't spend all of that money this year, but it will be spent next year. And then ESSER 3 will have to be expended by FY 2024, at the end of FY 2024. But we will make sure that we spend all of that money, so we're not leaving anything on the table.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I understand that we have to be very specific in the use of those funds, the emergency funds. But if we have other funds available, a surplus anywhere, are we allowed to reduce our debt with that money or not? And I know we can't use that ESSER money for that, but if we have other monies available, are we allowed to reduce our debt? Or is that on a very specific schedule?
We could do an abatement to reduce the debt, yes.
Okay.
That would be an
Would
option.
there be an advantage to that? Is there an advantage to doing that? Getting some of that debt off the books?
The advantage would be, well, it wouldn't be necessarily getting the debt off the books. The way that it would work would be that would be kind of a rebate to taxpayers. So that's how it would work. It wouldn't necessarily be prepaying the debt expenditures. It would be more of providing taxpayer relief. So that's how we would take care of that. And we're in a great position as far as debt is concerned. The district has very low debt, especially for a district this size. We have a very low debt capacity.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Mitchell.
Oh, you got a doctorate out of that. That's good. Awesome.
every time. Okay, we got to get that ball rolling.
It's all good.
Everybody always says it. Everybody keeps saying it. So I don't know. I guess people want me to go get my doctorate.
There you go. There you go. Well, great presentation. And again, even with a draft budget, helping us to understand it well, it's very much appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next would be my report. In board docs, you have my regular monthly report. I'm not going to really walk through that today. If you have questions about it, you can always reach out to me. But I do want to spend time with my report walking through the plan for this next school year. Oops, sorry. Let me try that again. Hold on. Shoot. Lost my screen. Okay. Always fun when that happens. All right, now then, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so as we prepare for this coming school year, we just want to make certain that we've talked about this a little bit in our last board meeting and want to really frame out some the potential options that we need to add to our programming for this coming year. Still a lot of moving parts as we move forward, but we know that based upon the guidance from ISB that the expectation is that we will be returning to in-person learning. And that will begin. Teacher Institute days are scheduled for August 16th and 17th. Teachers and all staff will be in person at their assigned buildings. We will not be able to do our Teacher Institute day like we have in the past, where we all gathered at JJC in one big room. My hope is that we'll be back to that at some point, but not quite yet. There'll be open house and back to school events on August 16th and 17th that will be in person at school sites. Specific dates and times for schools will be coming soon. Those will be most likely mid to late afternoon into the evening of those 2 nights as we prepare for the first day of school for students, a full day on August 18th. Now, ISB just recently, as of last Friday, came out with, in support of IDPH's COVID-19 guidance, some changes to mitigations. Let me start talking about masks to begin with. Basically, the new guidance, and this is guidance, states that masks are required if not fully vaccinated. That would apply to all staff, students, and visitors. We're still working on what potential protocols we might need to put in place for verification of vaccination. That's yet to be determined. But as the guidance now stands, masks are required, masks for the school year will be required for those that are not fully vaccinated. Now, that doesn't apply to bus transportation. Anyone riding on a school bus will be required to have a mask, whether they're vaccinated or not, while they're on the school bus. So there's always going to be little pieces that play in this. There is a lot of feeling afoot in various communities across the state and across our county about masks. We all have our own personal opinions. We have to make decisions based upon what's best for the organization. And as it now stands, the vaccination level, the lowest age is 12 years old. So that would indicate our preschoolers and our elementary students, for the most part, are not eligible for vaccinations and would need to be in masks at school. So again, we're still working on some of the protocols for that piece, but based on the guidance, that's what the guidance says. The guidance also indicates a 3 feet of physical distance when and where feasible. The ISB further extrapolated on that, the notion that if the 3 feet of physical distance is keeping students from being able to be in school, then they want you to look at other mitigations so that we can get students back in school. The goal, again, from ISB and from us as well, we want to have students back in school. So we will be checking physical distance and when and where feasible, making certain we can manage that. Hand washing and respiratory etiquette is still always something that can be done. Making sure that everyone, students and staff, stay home when they're sick. Any indication of illness, people should be staying home. And we want to continue to encourage vaccinations for all who are eligible. Again, anyone that's 12 years of age and older are eligible for the vaccine. And we do want to encourage folks to get the vaccine if eligible. Excuse me, as we're seeing in the data, there is an increase in COVID cases across the nation. And the majority of cases are showing up in folks that are not vaccinated. There are still some, though, that are showing up in those that are vaccinated, just not as serious of symptoms. So again, we continue to watch the COVID data. We're looking at things. The positivity rate is very low right now in our area, which is fabulous. We hope it doesn't go back up, but we're keeping an eye on it and watching the guidance that's provided to us from ISB and IDPH. And this all comes directly as well from the CDC. So to be ready for this next year, we still need options for some of our families. And so tonight, I want to walk through a proposed board policy that later on the agenda we'll be asking for you to take action to adopt so that we can have a remote educational program. The realities of trying to get everyone back in person, we want people back in person. However, there are going to be situations where some families, some students, based upon medical need, either themselves or in their home, they are going to potentially need to have a remote educational program. We're not sure how many people that will be. We have had people reach out to us to ask if we would still have a remote education program. This would not be the same as what we did last year. We want to take what we did last year and do better. In a lot of places, people are being told no remote education program allowed. I think that would be wrong because we need to have options. Did what we do last year worked? It worked, but did it work well for everyone? No, but it did work okay for some. So rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, this is an opportunity for us to keep the baby and make the bathwater better so that we can have a better program. So there is a school code 105 ILCS 5/10-29 that is a remote educational program. I'm going to walk through the pieces of the school code. These align directly with the board policy, again, that we'll be asking for approval of later in the meeting. So the remote educational program must align curriculum to the Illinois Learning Standards, must offer instruction and education experiences consistent to those given to students in the same grade level in person, must provide instructors that meet teacher qualifications and are responsible for planning instruction, diagnosing learning needs, prescribing content delivery through class activities, assessing learning, reporting outcomes to administrators and parents or guardians, and evaluating the effects of instruction. This goes on for a little ways, there's still more. Must also provide programs on the same days as the district's regular school term. So in other words, the first day of school in person is the first day of school in the remote educational program as well. Must establish a system to determine student participation. I'll explain more about that in a little bit. Approval of students in the program on a space available basis. We need to approve students in the program who provide the following evidence. They must be enrolled in the district. If they have an IEP, there has to be prior approval from that IEP team that the remote educational program will work for the student. There needs to be evidence of how the remote education program best serves the student's individual learning needs. That would be a statement from the parents. Medical necessity, a physician's note. Other considerations include the student's attendance, discipline, and academic achievement. Other areas of this school code and thus the policy for later must include a process for developing and approving a written remote educational plan for each student participating in the program. So you could kind of think of this as similar to an IEP that's individual to a student. This would be a remote education plan individual for each student participating in the program. Require students to complete their participation in the program within the district's regular school term, unless the student's participation is extended by the district. In other words, a day is a day, a year is a year, and we want to have those things fall within the same confines as the in-person students. Requires students to participate in all assessments administered by the district. District benchmarks can be taken remotely. However, the state mandated assessments must be taken in person. Those do not have a remote option. So we would set up a secure, safe environment for the students to come to a school building, into a classroom where they are in a safe environment for them to take those assessments. The program must align with requirements related to student records and comply with other state and federal laws, as well as board policies. There also must be an annual report to monitor and amend the program. Those are all the aspects of what the program needs to involve. It's quite a list of things, but it's not that we can't do it. We just have to make certain we take the steps carefully. So what would be the next steps if the board policy is approved later in the meeting? We would communicate with families. That communication would be ready to go out tomorrow morning if the board policy is approved for us to move forward with this remote educational program. We would be focusing on medical necessity as a priority. Now, does that mean no one else, if they don't have a medical issue, could be in the remote program? Not necessarily. However, medical necessity is the first priority to be used as far as gaining access to the remote educational program for this school year. We want to make certain that everybody has a safe place. An application process to provide the required evidence for student participation. And we're asking that application be due in no later than August 1st. And there's a whole list of things here, but I want to show you the application before I go any farther in this presentation. So we put together this application for parents to complete, as well as their licensed physician who works with them to complete. We are asking that this be dropped off to the JFK Administrative Center. There is a drop box, so even outside of work hours, these could be dropped off. And we'd like them there by no later than the end of the day on August 1st, so that we have time to review them. We ask here in this section to be completed by the parent or guardian, obviously the child's name, their birth, and the school they currently would be attending. Here's the description area for how the remote educational program best serves your child's individual needs. And then we also ask the parent that they consider and check off that they understand and acknowledge the following. First one, I understand that by submitting this request, my child will not receive remote services automatically, and that the superintendent or designee will review the information submitted to determine eligibility for remote learning services. I also understand that I may be asked to periodically update my child's health status and provide additional information. Next bullet, I understand that selecting remote learning for my child is a year-long commitment. A change may only occur for the next school year. I understand that during live instruction, my child's camera must be on and he or she must be in attendance during the teacher's full lesson and maintain passing grades in all classes. If attendance is not consistent and grades are failing, my child's placement may be reevaluated. I understand that my child will participate in district assessments remotely, but will need to be in person for all state mandated assessments. I understand that my child may participate in extracurricular activities and athletics while being a remote student without district provided transportation. My child's remote learning teacher may not be a teacher from his or her school. My child's teacher may be changed if learning methods are altered. My child's education will consist of 5 hours of instruction with no less than 2.5 hours a day of live instruction for full day programs. Students within a half-day program would receive 2.5 hours of day instruction with 1.5 of live instruction. Live instruction may be provided by an educator teaching in in-person classroom as opposed to a dedicated learning environment. It gives us an option if we need it. It's not our choice to do simulcast teaching. And the last bullet here is if my child has an IEP or 504 plan, I understand that service recommendations provided during remote learning will be determined by the student's IEP team. And then the parent needs to sign and date the form. The last page then is for the licensed physician to fill out and let us know that what is happening with the child physically, to know what the conditions are and the reason why the doctor is suggesting remote learning for the student, any special recommendations to the teacher, and a place for the physician to sign and provide a contact telephone number as well. The last section is simply for us to gather our information and bring that back to the application process. So as you can see, it's a pretty complete application. We want to make certain that we're really clear about the expectations and what will happen with that. Now, the other side of that will be communications with staff. Now, this part is still very tenuous because we don't know how many students we're even going to get. And we really need to ensure that we are doing this well. This isn't going to be a come one, come all remote educational program. It will be, again, based on this medical necessity as the priority. So staffing will be determined based upon need. Once we know the applications that have come in and approximate numbers, we will put out a posting or request for current staff who may be interested in such a position. We are not planning on having anyone teach in person and online at the same time. The staffing would be people to teach fully for the remote educational program. Teachers that would teach in this program would be teaching from an assigned space in a district building, not at their home. They would be in a classroom, so they're teaching from an educational environment. That way, when the students need to come in for mandated assessments, they have a place to come that is with that teacher that they've been working with online, who would then facilitate their mandated assessments. Teachers would be working with students from across the district, not just from the school where they may have been teaching previously. And we always get the question, well, when I'm done doing this, do I get to go back to my school? All efforts would be made to make that happen, yes. But the reality is we won't have enough from one school for a teacher just to work with students from one school. So they'll be working with students from across the district and potentially working with students from multiple grade levels, which is why we also are in conversation with some content providers, because it is not reasonable to think that our teachers would create content for multiple grade levels, multiple subjects, all on their own, and teach and still be sane by the end of the day. So we're looking at some highly qualified content providers who could provide the actual aligned to Illinois standards, like the program requires, content that the teacher would help the students manage their way through. We also are looking at making certain that these class sizes would be kept manageable. In-person instruction, our average class sizes are right around 25. Some are higher, some are lower. There's no way there would be 25 students with one teacher in this remote education program. As we begin, because of having multiple grade levels and just the uniqueness of the size, that's going to depend on how many applications we have that get approved, but that we can keep at a manageable level. We want to make certain that this program is successful for our students, but also for our staff. So we'll be looking to ensure that we make appropriate decisions along the way so that these classes are appropriately sized. And just for context's sake, I had multiple opportunities in California where this is the exact type of program that we set up. And so I'll be working very closely with this approval process and with the staffing and the support of the teachers. All of the content providers we're looking at provide professional development for the teachers to know and understand the content and the layout of the content in the learning management system, so that they can best manage the system as they go forward. We'll be making certain there's plenty of safety net around the teachers involved in this program to make certain it's successful. A couple of other pieces related to this next school year. You heard Mrs. Mitchell talk about the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 ARP grants. The ESSER 2 grant was approved last month by ISB. Excuse me, again, it's approximately $13 million. It includes things such as intervention supports for students, which involves additional staff, interventionists, paraprofessionals, psychologists, teletherapy, resources that are digital, as well as classroom school supplies, technology items and support, and some money toward facility needs, some HVAC upgrades, some furniture, and some partitions. And again, that money is to be used this coming year and the following year. The ESSER 3 money, the ARP funding, We had a request up on the district website for the past 30 days, gathering input based on what we presented to you at last month's board meeting, where we were focused on academic and digital learning supports, social emotional supports for students and staff, health and safety resources, and capital improvements. Administration will be reviewing that input. We downloaded it all into a spreadsheet so we can look at it. The grant submission then would be forthcoming, so to be determined. We know we have been awarded approximately $33 million. We'll plan to present next steps tentatively either at the August or September board meeting. This would for certainly, the portion for this coming school year would definitely be part of the budget in the September board meeting. So that may be what we shoot for as we look to wrap up the ESSER 3 grant for submission to ISB. We have gotten some pretty good feedback, both in English and Spanish. We're working on translating all the Spanish feedback so that we can make certain that we thoroughly are addressing and hearing the input that's been provided. So as I wrap this up, just some basic questions. Is it our intention or priority to have students be fully in person 5 days a week for school? Yes, absolutely. Do we feel that some students will need a remote option? Yes, absolutely. Again, not knowing how many students, we do need to plan for it, but we want to be careful that we are doing this well and doing it in accordance with this board policy that we'll be asking you to approve. Is it possible that things could change before school starts? Oh dear God, who knows? If I had a crystal ball, if I could predict the future, I could make a lot of money. We hope not, but we will keep everyone updated as we go. As it stands right now, these are our plans as I have presented. There's, I'm sure, many other questions. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing my slides so I can see you all and see what comments or questions you all may have as board members. So, what do you think?
It seems pretty comprehensive. One of my concerns is that that there is the August 1st deadline, which makes sense. However, is 2 weeks going to be enough time for parents to contact their family physician or pediatrician to make that connection and to have that approval? Because I know that a lot of pediatricians are really busy this time of year, just trying to give regular shots, regular physicals, sports physicals, what have you. So I'm wondering, not that the date isn't necessary, but what if parents say, you know, I can't get an appointment until the middle of August?
Well, they could turn in the 2 pages that are related to them with a note saying they have an appointment on X date with their doctor for the medical piece. You know, we'll have to flex with that if necessary. The doctor could fill out the form and fax it to us. So there's a lot of different ways we can help expedite that. But the parent could definitely submit their intent to include their child in the remote program by submitting the parent portion with a note saying that they're working on getting the physician note subsequently. So we know we're going to have to be flexible with all of this moving forward. So we're going to do our best, but we will need to know the medical necessity before we could fully place them. So, yeah.
Okay. And some of these programs that we're looking at later in the agenda, are these related to providing content for our students?
No, ma'am. The content providers, we're still in conversation. We'll be bringing contracts for that through at the August meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Dr. Rouse. Pardon me for being late.
That's okay.
Thank you. I really love the remote educational program. I was wondering about the medical priority. So I read online that like remote learning helped a lot of students who are neurodiverse and so who may be, you know, dealing with anxiety, depression, and those kinds of things. So how, I guess, for those students who may be undiagnosed or may not want to share their diagnosis, I mean, how are we addressing kind of the stickiness of kind of students' health histories and confidentiality?
That's why we're asking the parent for a statement as to why they feel this is the best next step for their child. And, you know, the realities are, because of the pandemic, we really feel that we need to put the medical necessity piece as a priority first. And then it's not saying we're closing the door to all others, but we do need to look at what is our capacity, and how many students do we have that have those concerns. I'm sure we'll get phone calls, we'll get Let's Talk messages, we'll get letters. And that's great. We'll take all of those things into consideration as we look at the applications, because we want to be able to help provide this option for any student that needs it, but we need to do it with specific next steps so that we're doing it correctly and making certain that we're really doing what's right for each and every student. This is the ultimate of personalized instruction.
Cool. Thank you.
Certainly.
Any other questions? Comments? No. Thank you, Dr. Ross.
Certainly. Yeah, we've been working hard on this, and we are constantly in conversation with others in the area and others across our state and across the nation in regards to best practices for creating such a program. I'm by no means thinking we would open a new school that's all virtual, but the realities of creating this, building this into a potential academy is not a bad idea, because it does work for students, especially like the ones, Eric, that you pointed out. And it did work well even this last year for some students, more so than others. And that's okay, because online learning, virtual learning, whatever name we want to put on it, e-learning, all of those things, it works really well for some, but not for all. And we recognize that, but having options as we move forward for our students, I think, is critically important. So, you know, one thing next month that we'll consider bringing forward would be a conversation around, do we really need to have snow days in the future, or do we need an e-learning plan where we simply continue our instruction and don't have snow days? And there's arguments on both sides of that. So we'll put together some information next month to talk about that, because there's some very specific pieces, again, in school code that we have to follow if we're going to use e-learning as a emergency day replacement and not make-up days at the end of the year. So not to mix the metaphors, but we'll call that one e-learning and this one the remote educational program for now, and see what we want to do with that as we move forward. So
I think the thing that I really appreciated as well was the accountability piece, because we do know that there were students that were maybe turning on in the morning, and then you wouldn't see them on the screen, and you didn't know if they were even in the building. So I think that accountability piece is really important, because if you're not participating in one way or the other, then you're obviously not going to learn anything. So
Right.
I'm particularly impressed by the accountability piece, that you do have to plug in, and you do have to sit there, and you do have to have the lessons. So I think
Right.
that's critical.
Well, and they'll be different. It'll look different in this program, because there'll be times when they'll be live with the teacher, and there'll be times where they're doing what's called asynchronous work. So they're working independently, still within the content that we're providing for them. But we will be looking at last year's attendance and grades and discipline to see if this is a good fit for a student as well. Last year was unique, but there may be some things we need to consider about that moving forward as well. So we want to make certain people are successful, but also our staff, not just the kiddos. We want our staff to be successful as well. And I think the content provider piece will make a huge difference in making that move forward, with teachers not having to create content, but just help the students navigate the content and be there for the support. So it'll be a nice piece, I think. So we're going to be looking for some courageous teachers to step into these roles. You know, and depending on how many students we have, we'll play that forward and keep you informed.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, then the next item was the FOIAs, the routine reports. There were 4 FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, 3 of them have been, let's see, 3 of which are, there are 4, 3 are outstanding. So we're still working on some of those, but we're clicking them off. So that's all of my stuff.
Okay, so we will make a motion to go into closed session under the following exceptions. Section 2C1, appointment, employment compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees or hearing a complaint against an employee. Section 2C2, collective negotiating matters or deliberation concerning salary schedules for classes of employees. Section 2C9 and 2C10, student discipline and other matters relating to individual students. Section 2C11, pending, probable, or imminent litigation. Section 2C21, closed session minutes. Can we entertain a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who the second was from.
Emil, second.
Thank you.
Okay, will you call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Inspector Doris,
Aye.
Inspector Zeke,
Aye.
Inspector Madison,
Aye.
Inspector Stanfield,
Aye.
Inspector Pritz,
Aye.
Inspector Roberts.
Aye. Motion carried. We will return. Okay. We will call the meeting to order. Stephanie, do the consent agenda.
Yes. Consent agenda. The action items listed under the consent agenda are routine business items that will be adopted by a single motion of the board unless a board member or the superintendent requests an item be removed from the consent agenda, discussed and voted on separately.
Okay, I will read the consent agenda items. Minutes, closed sessions, minutes, regular meeting, report number 30, payroll, treasurer's report and bills, report number 31, a resolution approving the treasurer's investments, report number 32, personnel report, compensation, hiring, promotion, termination, including resignation, discharge, and retirement, change of status. Report number 33, resolution authorizing the superintendent to apply for assistance under various provisions of state and federal acts. Report number 34, resolution to approve workers' compensation renewal. Report number 35, resolution approving the renewal of the Illinois School District Agency property, casualty, and umbrella insurance. Report number 36, resolution authorizing disposal of district personal property no longer needed for school purposes. Report number 37, resolution adopting an agreement with Hanover Research. Report number 38, resolution adopting an agreement with K-12 Insight LLC. Report number 39, resolution awarding contract to the lowest responsible bidder for disposable 3-section school lunch trays. Report number 40, resolution awarding a contract to the lowest responsible bidder for Seal Max ES 255 seal film. Report number 41, resolution awarding a contract to the lowest responsible bidder for sport packets. Report number 42, resolution adopting an agreement with Special Education Services for alternative school at Thompson Instructional Center for the school years and extended school years of 21-22, 22-23, and 23-24. Report number 43, resolution accepting the presentation of the budget for fiscal year 21-22, directing publication of its availability for inspection and providing for a public hearing and notice thereof. Report number 44, resolution adopting an agreement with Respondability LLC. Report number 45, resolution awarding a contract to the lowest responsible bidder for intrusion, fire, critical condition monitoring and services, and fire alarm and intrusion alarm communicator equipment. Report number 46, gift. Whew.
All right. Are there any requests to remove an item to be discussed and voted on separately?
Yes. I have 4, number 37, number 38, number 44, and number 45.
Okay, we will entertain a motion on the remaining agenda minus 37, 38, 44, and 45. Can we get a
So
motion?
moved.
Okay, and a second.
Second.
Stephanie, will you call roll?
Yes. Inspector Doris,
Aye.
Inspector Zeke,
Aye.
Inspector Madison,
Aye.
Inspector Stanfield,
Aye.
Inspector Pritz,
Aye.
Inspector Roberts.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, Deb, what you got?
Can you pull up number 37 on the screen? The Hanover research. Can we pull up that information, please?
The resolution?
Yes. What
Um,
exactly, all right.
I can answer your
exactly Are
question.
they going to provide?
They're
I
providing,
have to be, I can't see that and ask all the questions I wanted to ask. What specifically are they going to be doing?
I can speak to that. In board docs, we gave you under administrative content some specifics, if you were able to look at that. Hanover Research provides research support for various projects across the district. They've been working with the high school district for many years now. The services may include, but are not limited to, custom research reports, survey design, administration and analysis, interviews with industry issue experts, secondary research, data analysis, and benchmarking. They'll be working directly with the district superintendent and the district chief equity officer. They have multiple equity surveys and equity audit services. They also help gather the data necessary to begin and launch a strategic planning process, which we would be doing at the end of next school year in preparation for our strategic plan for the following 5 years after that. So the idea is having them on board so that we can begin gathering that data in preparation for that process along the way.
Okay, and is that a multi-year contract?
It
And
is a
it's
three, it is a
150,000, right?
it's a 3-year agreement, yes.
Okay. And then do we get a report from them annually, or do we get some feedback from them?
Yes, you'll be seeing their reports and things provided through the chief equity officer as well as myself along the way as we go. We could potentially have Hanover staff come out, but that would be at an additional expense for travel, but we can provide the reports and help explain them along the way as we go.
Okay. Do they have any input with the teachers? Are they providing any classwork or anything? I had my cataract surgery, so I couldn't read any of this stuff until today, so.
Okay, no problem, no problem. The equity surveys and equity audits will be done at all the school sites, and that will involve input from students, staff, and administration.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And for number 38, the K through 12 Insight,
That's our Let's Talk company. That's the
Okay.
communication tool. This is a renewal of, we've had them now for 3 years. So this is a renewal for the next 3 years for Let's Talk.
okay. I guess I didn't realize it was $140,000. for
Yes,
3
ma'am,
years.
and it is worth every penny.
Okay.
The
What, do
information
they
we're able,
analyze the information, or are they just gathering it?
well, Sandy has reported on it every year that we've had it, as far as the types of communication we get, the response times, the response from the stakeholders as far as their likability of what even the responses they're getting. We're able to track on there how quickly we're responding and the variety of topics that are coming in through Let's Talk. So Sandy has reported on that to the board every year since we've had the product.
And it's $140,000 over 3 years, right?
Over 3 years, yes.
Yes. And then respondability,
Respondability, yes. That is a new tool that a platform that provides real-time snapshot of the organization, tying team and individual efforts to goals, amplifying actions that work, and providing ongoing real-time insights to create a cycle of improvement. This will be specifically used with the coaches in the curriculum department. Mrs. Bradley, would you like to speak to this one any further?
Yes, it will be linked to our coaching process to measure our student outcomes. It will streamline our communication and identify opportunities to measure our results. It will support our continuous improvement process, and it will progress monitor our 4 major priorities, which are collaborative planning, instructional practices, assessment for and of learning, and community building.
Okay, is that a 1-year or a 3-year for 80,000? Is that 1 year?
That's a 3-year, I believe. Let me just double check. Mrs. Bradley, it's a 3-year, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, it's a multi-year contract, yes.
Okay. And then as far as number 45, the fire monitoring, there was a big difference in the prices that were given. Were we going with the lowest bidder?
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes, that's the lowest bidder.
Okay, that was 215,
I'm not looking.
$215,320.
Let's see. Yes.
Okay. I was surprised at the difference, the $200,000 difference, more than $200,000 difference in the people that were willing to provide the service. Is this for 1 year?
No, this is for 3 years.
3 years as well. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I just think it's important we know where all this money's going. So that's why I want
Absolutely.
clarification.
No, that's fine. We appreciate the questions. No problem.
Thank you.
We'll make a motion to entertain reports number 37, 38, 44, and 45.
So moved.
Second,
Stephanie?
Yes, Inspector Doris,
Aye.
Inspector Zeke,
aye.
Inspector Madison,
Aye.
Inspector Stanfield,
Aye.
Inspector Pritz,
Aye.
Inspector Roberts,
Aye. Excuse me, motion carry. Dr. Rouse?
Certainly. Report number 47, excuse me, this is the board policy on the remote educational program as presented earlier. The recommended action is to move adoption of the policy, policy 6165, remote educational program, and to waive the first reading because it's necessary and prudent in order to meet specific conditions to be legally compliant in establishing a remote educational program.
Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Stephanie?
yes, Inspector Doris,
Aye.
Inspector Zeke,
Aye.
Inspector Madison,
Aye.
Inspector Stanfield,
Aye.
Inspector Pritz,
Aye.
Inspector Roberts,
Aye, motion carried. We have opportunity for visitors to speak.
Good evening, President Roberts. Yes, we have several messages. I can start if you'd like me to. Could you hear me?
Inspector Roberts, you're speaking but not being heard.
Oh,
Sorry, can you, Mrs. Zaluski, can you wait for her to read the comment and then she'll call on you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Reading of public comments is limited to 3 minutes per comment. The board has established a 40-minute time period during each regular and special open meeting of the board for public comments with a 20-minute limit on any one subject. The full board policy is found in policy 230. Sandy, is there anyone who would like to address the board?
Yes, we have several messages. And I'll begin if you're ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, first one. Good evening, school board inspectors and Dr. Rouse. My name is Megan Vinson and I'm a teacher in the district. I'm emailing my comment tonight specifically about the proposed mask requirement for only vaccinated individuals. I'm attaching links about the dangers of masking children and adults and also about asymptomatic spread. I'm also attaching Illinois COVID data by zip code for the zip codes for our district. This data was compiled from this website, and the website is COVID-board.gov. fsmnorthwestern.edu. I hope that you are able to view them during the closed session. Many districts in Illinois are announcing that masks will be optional for all students and staff regardless of their vaccination status. Today, Manteno announced an optional mask option for their students and staff. They were in person for a majority of the school year with masks. Manhattan has also announced the same option for their students and staff. Each day, more and more districts are leaving it up to the parents' discretion for masking their children, no matter their age. As an employee, I am very concerned with the fact that all staff members' private medical information will be on display for all to see, creating segregated groups of individuals who have been vaccinated and those who haven't. Do we mask up if we haven't had the flu shot? Never. This seems borderline discriminatory, and I feel it will create a lot of issues amongst staff members. The data doesn't lie. 48.6% of Will County is already vaccinated. 13 new cases were reported for the entire county yesterday. The data I've shared below shows a 2.09% positivity rate for the last 7 days for the 5 zip codes our district serves. For the last 2 weeks, the rate drops to 1.83%. I know that safety is your first priority. Vaccines have been available for everyone who is eligible for months. Numbers are way down. The children deserve to go back to school with as much normal as possible. All I ask is that you consider this option for our district and ask the parents what they prefer. Ask the staff what they would prefer. We are the ones in the classrooms every day. Give us an option to choose to wear a mask if we feel it necessary, given the data. Give parents an option to put a mask on their child or not to put a mask on their child. Thank you for your time. And then she included some attachments.
Thank you.
The next one. Sorry, we have a friend that's visiting here. Dear members of the board, please make masks optional for all students and faculty this fall. The data is plentiful and clear that masks are unnecessary to keep children safe. The case numbers and deaths, thankfully, remain extremely low for our children all through the pandemic, no matter if it was peak time or a low time. You can see the low numbers in the data, and it's especially important to note that this is without a vaccine for kids 12 and younger. This data is taken from the CDC COVID tracker today. There's a lot of attachments. And she includes this article from the Lancet shows that children are not at risk, but have been negatively impacted by COVID mitigations. There's another attachment. This article shows that RSV is on the rise, which is much more serious risk to children. And the speculation is that mask wearing suppressed immune systems causing us to not skip the virus, but to delay it. And there's an attachment to a link, an article. The bottom line is that we, the parents, get to decide what is best for our children. We get to assess the risk versus benefit and decide what is best choice for our individual families. Thank you, Alyssa Suter.
Thank you.
Nope, I still have more, sorry. They're just loading.
Okay.
My name is Angela Searcy. I'd like to get right to the issue on masks, discriminatory vaccine status, as well as mandated random COVID testing. I will begin with addressing masks. It has been addressed that the school board's #1 concern for all kids' health and safety, and ultimately making a decision that's best for the community. I, along with many parents, feel that the best choice for our overall health, safety, and well-being of all students is to make masks optional. We've effectively entered into stage 5 with restrictions lifted by the CDC as well as IDPH, and ISB and IDPH allow local flexibility on how schools approach the return of students and staff members. And I am confident cooperation can be met without the use of masks mandates on our staff and students. A board who ultimately makes decision on what is best for the community for all kids' health and safety as a whole, then should take greatly into consideration the many communities within the many cities and states who've had no mask mandates, in-person learning all year last year, and minimal illness or infection. I, along with many other moms and dads, believe it should be a choice. That choice, proven successful by many other cities, does not put all kids as a whole in a health or safety risk. I'm aware this district serves roughly 10,000 students. There are many other cities across the nation with these numbers and even higher who have had in-person learning last year, as well as no mask mandates with low illness or infection rates. This issue should be voted on to push an agenda one way or another, but to allow parents to have a choice and to allow children in District 86 to the right of free breathing. I'd also like to oppose any judgment or acts of discrimination based on vaccination status. In my home, my children are taught to treat others how they want to be treated in every aspect, despite visible or invisible difference, religious affiliation, cultural beliefs and or practices, family makeup, social status, medical wellness or illness, the list goes on. Treating any person, whether a student or staff, indifferently based on either their compliance or opposition to vaccine status is discrimination. I would like to think that vaccinated students believing they've chosen the best medical directive for themselves will be treated with the same respect, dignity, and inclusion as unvaccinated staff members who also believe they too have the choice of the best medical directive for themselves. I'd like to conclude with my opposition against mandated random COVID testing. I have chosen to be the parent who refused to send my children to school or any other function with any sign of illness. Sadly, I've seen throughout the years, other parents don't share the same courtesy. Regardless of illness or infection, I am greatly opposed to anyone other than myself or my children's father make a medical decision on behalf of my child, and I am opposed to any procedure or testing performed on my children without my presence or consent. I am not opposed to non-contact temperature readings. I believe any type of medical testing and or procedure should be made by the parent or guardian of a child and in the presence of a parent or guardian. I believe if there are students sent to school with visible illness or temperatures obtained through non-contact thermometers that exceed normal levels, parents and guardians should be made to remove their students from school swiftly and be allowed to return them only when a doctor's note is provided. I believe policy should be enforced concerning parents who knowingly send a visibly ill child to school or allow an unreasonable amount of time to pass to pick up an ill child after the school has called. Good evening, Dr. Rouse and school board members of District 86. My name is Mary Eckert, and I am a teacher in the district. First of all, I would like to thank you for putting the staff and student safety first last school year and helping to minimize the spread of COVID-19. However, now that it's been over a year since the start of the virus, I'd like to express my concern with the mask mandate to those who did not receive the COVID-19 shot for this current school year. My first concern is the fact that those that cannot or do not wish to receive the COVID-19 shot will be flagged or visually identified against those who did receive the shot. Students and adults 12 years and older are being required by the district to wear a mask. This is a violation of those individual medical records and privacy. By wearing a mask, it allows for us to see the individuals who refuse the shot. Or cannot get the shot for whatever private reason they choose or their parents choose. I strongly believe that this will divide our staff and students. Students without masks will be treated differently than those with a mask by both their peers and in many cases the staff. This in turn can eventually lead to harassment against those who choose not to get the COVID-19 shot. Wearing a mask or not wearing one should be the adults and parents' decision. This should not be left up to the district. If a staff member would like to wear a mask, or if a parent wants their child to, it should be left up to them, not the district. The district has no right dictating who wears one and who does not. Also, as a primary teacher, it is very difficult teaching phonics, foundations, to students while wearing a mask. Those that are mandating masks are not in the classroom daily. If they were, they would see for themselves that foundations is not just taught for 30 minutes a day. At any given time, the teacher is constantly emphasizing on sounds that letters make, and classroom teachers are showing our students how to get their mouths ready to produce those sounds. How are students going to see the teacher's mouths when some teachers are covered up by a mask? At the same time, how are teachers going to see students 11 years and younger mouse when they are required to produce those sounds? This is not just the case for letter sounds, but also accurately pronouncing vocabulary in various subjects and numbers as well. Schools across the nation have a lot to catch up to academically and socially from the school year and on. Mandating a mask has already been proven. The ineffectiveness of spreading a virus is absurd. Why aren't staff and parents involved in making a decision for mandating masks? These are the children of Joliet residents. Their opinion should be heard, and this is the same for staff members of District 86. I truly hope you take into consideration my words. I have been a dedicated and loyal teacher in the district for 13 years now. Everyone in the district should be considered and left the mask wearing up to the individual and/or parents. I thank you for your time. Mary Eckert. Hello, my name is Ronnie Ramirez, and I like to use my comments as a voice for my children and myself and my family and all the children residing in District 86. I would strongly like to voice my opinion on mask wearing being optional for students and staff. The ISE and IDPH allow local flexibility on how schools approach the return of students and staff members in conjunction with restrictions lifted from the CDC. I believe optional mask wearing will still keep the health and safety and well-being of all students and staff a priority. I'm absolutely against any type of vaccinated discrimination or segregation. Everyone has their own opinion, and I wholeheartedly believe that it's what's best is for his or her own family. One child should not be set aside and watch others play as a result of vaccinated status. My family has been met with discrimination in other areas, and any and all type of discrimination is unacceptable. I would also like to oppose mandated random COVID testing. Nobody should conduct any medical practice on my child without my knowledge, consent, and presence. Thank you. Hello. Well, I'm not a resident of Joliet 86 district. I'm a parent of 3 and a public school teacher and a former school administrator in the western suburbs. As a teacher, I want all my students in all schools to return to school in August without a mask. I want to see my students smile at each other and interact with each other more fully without a mask. After 16 months, we have the data to know that children are fine. They have been fine and will be fine without any further COVID mitigations. Please help your teachers and students start the year right without masks. Sincerely, Jennifer Wardinsky. Hi, my name is Angelica Searcy. I'd like to get right to the issue on masks. I've been addressed that the school board's #1 concerns are all kids' health and safety and ultimately making a decision what's best for the community. I, along with many other parents, feel that the best choice for the overall health, safety, and well-being of all students is to make masks optional. We've effectively entered into stage 5 with restrictions lifted by the CDC as well as the IDPH, and ISB and IDPH allow for local flexibility on how schools approach the return of students and staff members, and I am confident that with cooperation, we can be met without the use of mask mandates for our staff and students. A board will ultimately make decisions on what's best for the community, for all of our kids' health and safety as a whole. Then you should take greatly into consideration the many communities within the many cities and states who've had no mask mandates, in-person learning all year last year, and the minimal illness on infection. I, along with many other moms and dads, believe it should be a choice. That choice, proven successful for many other cities, does not put all kids as a whole in a health or safety risk. I'm aware this district serves roughly 10,000 students, and there are many other municipalities across the nation with these numbers and even higher who've both had in-person learning last year, as well as no mask mandates with low illness or infection rates. This issue should not be voted on to push an agenda one way or another, but to allow parents to have a choice and allow children in District 86 to the right to free breathing. Members of the board, please make masks optional for all students and faculty this fall. The data is plentiful and clear that masks are unnecessary to keep children safe. The case numbers and deaths thankfully remain extremely low for children all through the pandemic, no matter if it was a peak time or a low time. You can see the low numbers in the data, and it's especially important to note that this is without a vaccine for kids 12 and under. This data is taken from the CDC COVID tracker today. And there's 4 attachments listed. The bottom line is that we, the parents, get to decide what is best for our children. We get to assess the risk versus benefit and decide what is best choice for our individual families. Thank you, Alyssa Suter. COVID testing. My name is Angela Searcy. I'd like to address my opposition against mandated random COVID testing. I have chosen to be a parent who refused to send my children to school and other function without any sign of illness. Sadly, I've seen throughout the years many parents do not share this courtesy. Regardless of illness or infection, I am greatly opposed to anyone other than myself or my child's father to make a medical decision on behalf of my children. I'm opposed to any procedure or testing performed on my children without my presence or consent. I am not opposed to non-contact temperature readings. I believe any type of medical testing and or procedure should be made by the parent or guardian of a child and in the presence of a parent or guardian. I believe there are students sent to school with visible illnesses or temperatures obtained through non-contact thermometers that exceed normal levels, and parents and guardians should be made to remove their students from school swiftly and be allowed to return them only when a doctor's note is provided. I believe policies should be enforced concerning parents who knowingly send a visible ill child to school or allow an unreasonable amount of time to pass to pick up an ill child from the school as called. Vaccinated status, mask, vaccinated status, and COVID testing. Hello, my name is Angela Searcy. I'd like to strongly oppose any judgment or acts of discrimination based on vaccinated status. In my home, my children are taught to treat others how they'd like to be treated in every aspect, despite visible or invisible difference, religious affiliation, cultural beliefs, and or practices, family makeup, social status, medical wellness or illness, the list goes on and on. Treating any person, whether a student or staff, indifferently based on either their compliance or opposition of vaccine status is discrimination. I would like to think that as a vaccinated students believing they've chosen the best medical directive for themselves will be treated with the same respect, dignity, and inclusion as unvaccinated staff member who also believes that they have chosen the best medical directive for themselves. And I believe I've read them all.
Thank you, Sandy. Dr. Rouse?
Yes, ma'am.
He says to turn it over to you for some reason.
Oh, I think we're at other comments. Oh, sorry. We're at the end of the meeting. That's a misprint on your sheet there. Ready for other comments from the board before we adjourn.
Any other board comments or questions before we go?
I just have a couple of quick things. First of all, I'd like to thank Tamara and Dr. Rouse for their presentations and the information they provided. I have a couple of questions. Are we caught up with any building projects or any maintenance issues that we had to have done over the summer? Going forward to school opening in a month? And also, I have been reading a lot of information concerning children receiving their regular vaccines, the ones that they're supposed to get before they come to school. And I was wondering if we were up to date with that. Are they getting their measles, polio, so on and so forth?
I'll ask Mrs. Mitchell to respond on the facilities question, and then Dr. McNeil, if you could be ready on the vaccine question. So Mrs. Mitchell?
Sure. Any maintenance projects that we had scheduled for the summer are on track to be completed for the start of school. So we're in good shape with our facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. McNeil?
Yes, and in preparation for registration, we're still collecting our vaccinations as scheduled. We haven't changed anything. Our nurses, in fact, are allowed to start work a couple weeks early so that they can take a look at all of our medical records to make sure that our students are in compliance.
And I believe, Dr. McNeil, the deadline for those regular vaccines is they have to be done by October 15th.
October 15th, yes.
Yeah. Students are excluded from school if they have not completed those regular vaccines by that time. But that does not include the COVID vaccination. That would be the regular vaccines.
And how are we with registration?
We're currently at approximately 70%, I believe, or approaching 70% registered. We've got folks working to close those files by making certain all the proper documentation is in. We are going to do some evening sessions at some of the buildings in case people need assistance. It is a fully online process, but some folks need some extra assistance. So we're going to have some of our clerical staff from the school buildings doing some evening sessions to help try to get more registrations in by the end of the month so that we can ensure that we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think I have a question. Jumping back to the excluded students due to the vaccines, the regular vaccines, are those students allowed to tap into the remote learning option if they, for whatever reason, they don't get their vaccines in time?
This past year, that was allowable through ISB. We'll have to see if they make that an allowable option this coming year, because as it stands right now, that's not normally what is allowed. Because we want students to get those normal vaccines. Otherwise, we will have some trouble out there in the community, unfortunately, if we're not getting those regular vaccines. So at this point, I would say no, but we'll be looking to ISB for direction if that becomes a problem.
Do you happen to know like the average percentage of students who are not ready with those vaccines because I know as an educator, I've had students who probably 2-3 weeks without those vaccines and missing class.
Right. Dr. McNeil, do you have any data on that, or could you speak to that?
I don't have any precise numbers for you, but we've increased our nursing staff to be very supportive with our families and helping direct them to local clinics. So we usually close that gap with those numbers. And in any event, in some cases, some of our families may be classified as McKinney-Vento, in which that can be waived. And so those kids aren't excluded. So there's a lot of different variables that we consider to try to keep that number down low and to support our families as much as possible.
Sonny, just for clarification, they're not excluded if they're homeless from getting the vaccines, right? They still have to get the vaccines, right?
They do have to get the vaccines, but they are not excluded from school. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if there's no other comments, I just want to thank you all for your support on passing the board policy for the remote educational program. I'll keep you informed in my weekly emails as we receive applications and move forward with that process and prepare for the beginning of the school year. It'll be here before we know it. I can't believe we're already this far into July, but here we are. So thank you for your support.
And I just wanted to say, I was excited to see that report. I read it beforehand, and always, and I keep putting that I'm an educator, so I'm always like waiting to see what other schools are doing in other districts. And I know teachers are concerned, and I'm just happy to see our students going back to the building, excuse me, to the building, whether it's wearing masks or not. I'm just happy to see them back. And then let's get over one hurdle first, and then we can get to the next. And I think the board did the right thing with adopting that policy tonight.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Rouse. You and your team, the effort and the time. I'm sure sleepless nights. I'm just trying to get everything tied in together to make sure that the teachers have what they need and the students are getting the learning that's needed for them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? None. We will make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Yeah. Stephanie, would you call the roll?
I will. Inspector Doris,
Aye.
Inspector Zeke,
Aye.
Inspector Madison,
Aye.
Inspector Stanfield,
Aye.
Inspector Pritz,
Aye.
Inspector Roberts.
Aye. Motion carried. The meeting is adjourned. Everyone, please have a great night and stay safe.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.